Alright guys, we are back. Good evening, good morning, or good afternoon. As always, it is so great to see you. And friends, we're going to be talking about a few things that you could be doing to take more creative control over your photos. And a long time ago, when I started out in photography, guys, I shot in full auto all the time, and my guess is most of you did the same thing as well, but eventually I learned the skills and gained enough confidence to begin taking control away from my camera and putting it squarely on my shoulders. Now for some people this is a relatively smooth transition, but for others it can cause a lot of anxiety. After all, it's easy to let the camera do all the work, isn't it? But shooting in manual mode requires you to know how to manipulate aperture, shutter speed, and ISO all at the same time. But the good news is that you don't need to jump from full auto to full manual. There are options, and those are the options that we're going to be chatting about here today. Now speaking of this video, my hope is that watching this video is going to help you take better control over your photos. And of course, if this happens, my friend, I sure would appreciate you do me a big gigantic solid and hitting that like button down below. See, what happens when you hit that like button, and it's a small little act that you're going to do there, but it really has a big side effect for our channel. So not only does it tell us which videos resonate, which videos help you the most, which is going to help us kind of steer our rudder towards more video content that is relevant towards your needs, but also you may know YouTube's algorithm pays close attention to things like likes. So when you hit that like button, it's telling the YouTube algorithm that this video is helpful. So what YouTube then does is it shows that video, or shows this video to more people, which again helps us grow this channel. So my friend, I would greatly appreciate it you hitting that like button down below. Now, with that said, pull up a seat and let's go. Let me go back and clarify something really fast, guys. Full auto mode isn't all that bad. In fact, it's a great way to start learning photography. So since the camera controls the exposure settings, you're freed up to focus on things like composition, framing, perspective from which you shoot the shot, and so forth. Guys, these are all very valuable skills to have, and full auto mode allows you to develop those skills when you're just starting out. But as you grow as a photographer, you need to take more creative control over your images, and to do that, you need to take control of the camera settings, not the camera. So while full auto mode is fine for all you newbies out there, once you get some experience underneath your belt, you need to start using the camera modes that give you more control. Speaking of which, a while back I did a detailed video on aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Today's video is really going to build off those concepts. Now, if you aren't completely confident of these concepts, hit the pause button on this video, go down below in the description. I'm going to put a link to that other video. Go there, watch that video first, then come back and watch this video. Now, if you're ready to roll, have a look at the dial on your camera. You're going to see that there are a variety of different camera modes available. Now, we're going to ignore most of these in this video and just focus on two of them: aperture priority, which is labeled A or AV on the camera dial, and shutter priority, which is labeled S or TV on the camera dial. Now, believe it or not, you can use these two modes for the vast majority of your images. Better still, you can get more creative control over how these images look, but without being responsible for manually adjusting all three exposure settings. Pretty nice, huh? Let's start this party by discussing aperture priority mode. Now in this mode, you tell the camera what aperture you want to use, and the camera is going to automatically adjust the shutter speed for you. Now, if you remember my tutorial on exposure settings from a while back, aperture refers to the size of the diaphragm opening that allows light into the camera. Shutter speed controls how long the sensor is exposed to light, and of course ISO controls how sensitive the sensor is to light. So in aperture priority mode, you're telling the camera how large or how small you want that hole in the lens diaphragm to be. The larger the opening is, the more light that enters into the camera. Likewise, the larger the opening, the blurrier the background will be. Now conversely, the smaller this opening is, the less light that enters the camera and the less blurry the background will be. This being the case, aperture priority mode is a good choice when you want to take portraits. Now in this image, you can see how the subject is perfectly sharp, but the background is nicely blurred. Now this is usually what you want in a portrait because it helps separate the subject from the background and draws your attention to the subject. So let's say I want to create a portrait like this one with beautiful background blur. Now I put my camera in aperture priority mode, in this case AV, and then select the low f-stop number, for example like f2. Now keep in mind, the lower this number is, the more background blur that I'm going to have in my photos. Now since I'm in aperture priority mode, once I select f2, my camera is going to select the shutter speed to match it in order to get the best exposure. Now if I adjust the aperture to, for example, f4, let's move to f4, here we go. The camera will adjust the shutter speed again, so all I need to worry about is the aperture that I want to use. Again, whatever that creative approach that I want in the photo is what I need to focus when using this mode. Using a low f-stop number isn't just for portraits either. Product photography, fashion photography, food photography, macro photography all benefit from shallow depth of field that you get when you use a low f-stop number. But what if I'm photographing a landscape or a cityscape and I want everything in focus? Well, all I have to do is select a higher f-stop number like f16. Doing so brings the entire scene into focus. Like in this shot, notice how everything from front to back is nice and sharp. That's because a higher f-stop number was used to increase the depth of field. Now again, when I select f16, my camera will automatically select the shutter speed to match it. I get the creative control in being able to determine the depth of field, but without the pressure of having to adjust my shutter speed. So to recap, let's look at a series of shots that I took, each using a different aperture. So as you can see, as the f-stop number increases, the depth of field increases and the sharper the entire image becomes. The creative control comes from simply putting the camera in A or AV mode and then changing one simple setting, which isn't bad at all. Now there's one other thing that you need to consider when using aperture priority. Now as you select higher and higher apertures, the less light that is going to be allowed into the lens. The shutter speed can reach a point to which is going to be too slow for you to hold the camera in your hands. The solution to this problem is to increase your ISO or use a tripod or to set your camera on a stable surface. Just keep an eye on your images for blurriness due to camera shake so you know when it's time to bust out your tripod or spike up your ISO. Now let's discuss shutter priority mode. Now in this mode, you tell the camera what shutter speed that you want to use and the camera is going to automatically adjust the aperture to get the right exposure. And since shutter speed controls the duration of light that's coming in, you're telling the camera how long you want the shutter to remain open. Now a slower shutter speed keeps the shutter open longer. The longer the shutter speed is open, the more likely that movement in the scene is going to be blurred. So of course a faster shutter speed does just the opposite. The faster it opens and closes, the more likely that the movement in the scene is going to be frozen. And as you might imagine, shutter priority is a good choice when you're out photographing subjects that are on the move, like people, waterfall, animals, cars, and so forth. Now in this example, a long shutter speed was used to blur the movement of the car's taillights as it drove in front of me at Alabama Hills. Now to get this effect, I used the shutter speed of 20 seconds. Now the longer the shutter stayed open, the longer the light trails will go as the car passes in front of me. Remember, as I adjust the shutter speed, the camera is going to automatically select the aperture that is going to give me the best exposure. Now if you want to do the opposite and freeze motion of a moving subject, like in this shot, you need to crank up the shutter speed. Now the shutter speed you need to select depends on a few factors, none of which is how fast the subject is moving. Freezing the motion of a turtle, for example, will require a much slower shutter speed than freezing the movement of, for example, an Olympic sprinter. Now, you're going to need to experiment with the shutter speed to figure out which works best for the situation. So if I want to create an image in which I blur or freeze motion, guys, all I need to do is simply put my camera in TV mode and select the appropriate shutter speed. If I want to freeze motion, all I'm going to do is select a fast shutter speed, for example, like 1/1000th of a second. Conversely, if I want to blur motion, well, I'm going to choose a much slower shutter speed, like 3 seconds. Now, keep in mind, depending on your ambient light, you may need to adjust the ISO to get the desired shutter speed. Now, to recap, let's examine a series of shots of which were taken with different shutter speeds. As you can see, as the shutter speed increases, the motion blur decreases. Again, I get this added creative control in my images by changing one camera setting. Now, obviously, as shutter speed gets slower and slower, you need to support your camera on a tripod. This will ensure that you don't get camera shake and the only blur in the image is due to the subject moving. With that said, you should have better understanding of aperture priority and shutter priority modes and how they can be used to give you more creative control over your images. So really, at the end of the day, get out there and practice, get comfortable making the adjustments with aperture priority and shutter priority mode and see how these can really creatively make an impact on your photos. For more details on these camera modes, check the description below for links to detailed tutorials. Now let's take a moment and talk about our current giveaway. Here are the prizes that we have this time around. A remarkable 2 tablet, a set of HMI filters with case, a $100 Adorama gift card. Now, as always, entering the giveaway is really simple. Step 1, like this video and subscribe to our channel. Step 2, leave a comment below. In fact, the more of our videos that you watch and leave a comment on, the more chances that you have to win. So get watching some more of the videos and leave some comments. Step 3, register on Photography Talk and introduce yourself in the forum. Now, if you introduce yourself during one of the last giveaways, you're still eligible to win. But friend, as I keep saying over and over again, swing by, let us know how you're doing. We would love to see you. Friend, that is it. For complete details on the giveaway, including how to register on Photography Talk and how to say hello in the forum, check out the description below. Good luck. Well, there you go, friends. This was a fun video to put together. I hope you find these tips very useful towards getting out there and exploring and getting more creative with your photography. As always, you know I gotta ask you, if this video was helpful, if you were mildly entertained, do me a favor, hit that like button down below, and if you currently aren't subscribed to the channel, well, hit that subscribe button so you're part of the family, and hell, while you're at it, hit that bell to be notified each time that we come out with a new video. My friends, I'm gonna be jumping out of here, so you get out there, stay healthy, and create your best shot.